It's hard to believe that those words were written thousands of years ago. How appropriate they are for today. I read about a famous revival in Wales in 1904 and 1905. Churches were so crowded that hundreds of people could not get in. Meetings lasted from 10 in the morning till midnight. I think we should try this again. Oh, wait. They were marked by confession of sin, prayer, spontaneous singing, and testimonies. 100,000 people were converted. Drunkenness was cut in half. Taverns went bankrupt. Judges were given white gloves to indicate that they had no criminal cases to hear. Coal mines did not operate because the horses refused to work. They were so accustomed to commands full of profanity that they could not understand the new language used by the miners. That is a religious revival. I think it's what this country needs. Have you ever had a defeat that was so bad that you nearly gave up? Let me tell you about a pitcher from the old Brooklyn Dodgers named Harry Hartman. He was a gifted young ball player whose day of glory arrived in 1918 when he was called from the minors to pitch a game against the Pittsburgh Pirates. He had dreamed of a great career, but his dreams started to fade when his very first pitch went for a single. Then the next batter tripled. Hartman was shaken up as he walked the next batter on 4 straight pitches. And when he did throw a strike to the next hitter, it went for a single. At that point, he had had enough. He headed for the showers, he dressed, he walked out of the stadium, he went straight to the Navy recruiting office where he enlisted. The next day, he was in military uniform, never to be heard from again in professional baseball. Poor old Harry. He was defeated before he really began. In 1957, Henry Ford bragged about producing the car of the decade. That car turned out to be the Edsel. How bad was the Edsel? There was only one recorded case of an Edsel ever being stolen. That probably sums up the car's popularity. But my family owned one. If we still had it, it would be worth a fortune. In fact, I occasionally still go back behind the garage just to check and see if under an old drawer there's an old Edsel. The wisest people are those who learn to handle life's difficult moments, setbacks, failures, embarrassment, humiliation. They happen to all of us. When actress Carol Channing was touring in the play Hello, Dolly, there was always a cocktail party for the press in each city. And she was a journalist's delight because the writers knew that they could ask her almost anything and get an entertaining reply. One party, a female reporter chirped up. She said, "Miss Channing, do you remember the most embarrassing moment of your life?" "Yes, I certainly do," said Carol. "Next question." Heartaches happen. Sorrow happens. Life throws us difficult pitches. And every once in a while, a real tragedy occurs, like in Sedgwick this week. So, hear this word of comfort and assurance. God has not abandoned us. God's hand still sustains us. God will not let us fall. You see, when we feel really down, three things often happen. First, we see one thing going wrong, and we generalize that our whole world is out of whack. Well, maybe only 10% of our life is really in the pits, but we have a tendency to focus on that percent and forget about what is really going pretty well. And boy, that's happening to us every day, isn't it? We assume that because one area of our life is crumbling, all of our life is in trouble. Well, the second faulty assumption we make is that our problems are permanent. Feels that way. Never know happiness again. That's wrong, but it feels like it. And we've got a lot of folks dealing with that right now. You know, there's an ancient legend about King Solomon. He wanted to humble his most trusted advisor, so he said to this advisor, "There's a certain ring that I want you to bring me. It has magic powers. If a happy man looks at it, he becomes sad. And if a sad man looks at it, he becomes happy." Well, Solomon knew that no such ring existed, but he wished to give his advisor a touch of humility. Months went by, and yet the advisor had no idea where he could find such a ring. Well, one day, he decided to take a walk into one of the poorest quarters of Jerusalem. He passed by a merchant who had begun to set out his day's wares. "Have you, by any chance, heard of a magic ring that makes the happy wearer forget his joy, and the broken-hearted wearer forget his sorrow?" asked the advisor. Well, the old man took a plain gold ring from his carpet, and he engraved something on it. When the advisor read the words on the ring, his face broke out into a wide smile. That night, he presented the ring to the king. As soon as Solomon read the inscription, he knew that his advisor had bested him. The inscription consisted of these words: "This too shall pass." Nothing is permanent. There are people who have a setback in their life, and they become so distraught that they resort to taking their own lives. If they had just waited, if a friend had just gotten to them in time, they would have discovered that most problems are temporary. Little in this world is permanent except love. Everything else disappears sooner or later. Again, I don't minimize the pain that we may be in, the pain that folks are going through today. Life can be very cruel, and our pain can be very intense. But given time, most of our hurts heal. Third assumption we make, of course, is that we are alone, that God has forsaken us. Even Jesus on the cross cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Well, if you never ask that question, just wait. Most of us do, sooner or later. But Jesus knew that God had not forsaken him. His was a cry of pain. The sins of the world were on his back. His cry was that of reaching the absolute depth. For that moment, at least, perhaps he was forsaken, but not for long. There may be times when we feel forsaken, but deep in our hearts, we know that even though we cannot feel God's presence at that moment, we are not alone. The Scottish preacher James Stewart once described our lives like this: "It is when you have sunk right down to rock bottom that you suddenly find that you have reached the rock of ages." Don't focus on that which is going wrong and forget that much is going right. This too shall pass. In Joshua it is written this: hold these words. Be strong. Be brave. Be fearless. You are never alone. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Jesus is our rock and our salvation. Whom shall we fear? May you be blessed by a simple witness.